Okay, we're live now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Gwen Whistler. I'm the chair of the Finance and Human Resources Committee of the Asheville City Council, and I'd like to welcome you to the March 22nd remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we continue to work through holding these committee meetings a bit differently. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 5257. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. So I'm now going to go through a roll call and just ask folks to do a brief hello. And when you're not speaking, just a reminder to mute. So Councilwoman Turner.
Good afternoon.
Hold on just a minute. Sorry. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good afternoon.
Is Rachel on? No. Okay. But who else is on here? Oh, Peggy Rowe is on, interim assistant.
Oh, thank you.
And Finance Director Tony McDowell.
Good afternoon.
Is Becky here?
No, Becky's not here today.
Okay. Budget Manager Taylor Floyd.
Afternoon.
And for some reason, they've got Amber Weaver, but she wouldn't be on here. I'm not really sure why. And let's see, who else do I have? I have Greg Schuler and David Melton. Who else is going to speak today? Anyone? Okay.
Ken Putnam.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the committee agenda. The first item is the approval of minutes. Do I have any questions or changes to the minutes?
No questions or changes, and I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Now I'll have to do a roll call for this. Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye, so the minutes are approved as presented. The next item is the fiscal 2023 fees and charges. So I'm going to turn this over to Tony McDowell, and then I think Taylor Floyd will follow up. So I'm going to flip it over to you, Tony. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Whistler, and good afternoon, everybody. Tony McDowell, Finance Director. As Councilmember Whistler indicated, today's next agenda item, and really the only agenda item today from staff, is committee review of the FY 22-23 fees and charges that are being proposed for next fiscal year. As you mentioned, Taylor Floyd, our budget manager, is also here today to assist with the presentation. We also have a number of staff from each department on as well to answer any specific questions that the committee may have. So, Alicia, can you bring up the presentation? So while Alicia's bringing the presentation up, fees and charges and the committee review is really one of our first steps in the budget process each year. And we bring the fees to you all and then on to City Council after that, early in the process for a couple reasons. One is it allows us to go ahead and build in any potential increases in fees and charges to the manager's proposed budget that we bring you in May. And so that definitely adds a level of certainty into the budget that helps us as we're preparing the budget. And then it also means fewer changes in the budget potentially after it's presented in May. It also allows us to begin communicating any fee changes to our citizens, customers, and stakeholders well in advance of the July 1 start to the fiscal year so that they can prepare as well. So we can go to the next slide at this point. So today's presentation, we're going to start with just a quick overview of fees and charges. You all probably see some familiar donut charts that we've shown you all in the past. And then we're going to talk about three of the rate adjustments and fee adjustments that we've talked to you all in the past about, the first being the water rate adjustment. Then we're going to talk about stormwater, solid waste, and then we do have a few other minor fee changes that primarily affect developers and direct users of fees. And those are all in the staff report that Alicia sent out yesterday. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of those. So next slide, please. So just quickly on fees and why we charge for services. And so just a few bullet points on this slide to kind of outline and go over that. One obviously is a customer versus community benefit. If you're talking about a service that's going to benefit the entire community, in a lot of cases, it makes more sense to pay for that service through property or sales taxes. If you have a service that's going to benefit a specific customer or set of customers, it makes more sense to charge a fee. And then there's a couple other things we kind of outline here. One is to kind of ensure access, and then also some statutory requirements about when we have to charge fees for certain services. Each year as a part of the budget process, departments review their fees, and we look at a number of factors each year as a part of that review. One being the cost to provide service. We're looking at, have there been substantial increases in the cost to provide service? Is there a desire to do more in a particular service area that might benefit from a fee increase? We also look at who benefits from the service and also who pays the service and pays the fee for the service as well. And then we periodically review our fees with fee studies, and we use outside consultants for that. In the past 5 years or so, we've done fee studies for our parks and recreation and our development services fees. And with those, that allows us to do some benchmarking where we compare to other organizations and also look at what our own cost recovery percentage is for some of our services compared to other jurisdictions. So next slide, please. So again, just a couple of charts to kind of indicate where our revenues come from. This is the one we showed you all last week at the council retreat. This is our general fund, a budget of about $145 million. And as I said last Friday, kind of the takeaway from this is that the vast majority of revenue in the general fund comes from property and sales taxes, about 76%. And so fees make up a very small percent of the general fund budget, around 12%. And so when we propose fee adjustments in the general fund, in a lot of cases, it's not really moving the needle on our revenue. So we may raise certain fees, but they're not necessarily going to bring in a lot more revenue into the general fund. The largest of those fees in the general fund is the solid waste fee, and we will be discussing that with you all later on. But most of the fees in the general fund are smaller and bring in less significant revenue than property and sales taxes. Next slide. So this pie chart shows our enterprise fund revenues, and you can see the story here is directly opposite in many cases of the general fund. Enterprise funds are funds such as water and stormwater that in some way, shape, or form resemble private businesses. And so as you would expect with a private business, most of the revenue from our enterprise funds comes from the fees and charges that they charge, or the fees that they charge their customers. So for our enterprise fund budgets in FY 21-22, fees and charges represent about 70% of their overall budgets. And we're going to talk to you all specifically about water and stormwater here in just a moment. Next slide. So I'll go into the water rate adjustment, and then we have David Melton here. He can answer questions after I've gone through a few slides, and then I'll turn it over to Taylor for the rest of the presentation. So with the water rate adjustment, and you can go to the next slide, Alicia. Just a quick reminder, the Water Resources Fund is the largest enterprise fund. It's the second largest budget outside of the general fund. It's almost 37 million. It is the city's largest department. Because it is a large department and has substantial capital costs, We do use a consultant to develop our rate model, and you all heard from our consultants last year at several different presentations about the update to the rate model that they did. We also receive a debt rating for our water debt, separate from our general fund debt, because it is a large enterprise system, and we currently have a double or AA1 rating on our debt. And as you can see, like I mentioned, substantial capital debt and operating costs in the water fund. And in particular, you all heard David Melton talk about the upcoming meter replacement project, in which we're going to be looking to borrow approximately $20 million. We also just completed the North Fork Dam project, and the borrowing for that was done last fall to the tune of about $40 million. So substantial costs in the water fund. So we can go to the next slide. So as we spent a great deal of time talking to you all about last year, we did in FY20 lose about $7.5 million in revenue from what we called our capital improvement fee. We didn't go into some of the specifics of that in this presentation because we did cover it in detail last year, but as a result of a lawsuit, we stopped charging that capital improvement fee, and revenue went down by about $7.5 million in FY 2021. Last year, we talked to you all about a rate adjustment or rate realignment plan that would span multiple fiscal years that would begin to allow us to recover that revenue over time. And that's what we're here to present and recommend for you all's adoption next year is the second year of that plan. We can go to the next slide. So just as a reminder, and we included this chart last year as we were talking to you all, like I said, the capital improvement fee went away in fiscal year 21. So you can see for the single family residential user, and this is kind of the average single family residential user for a bi-monthly bill, their rate did drop, or their overall bill did drop in FY21. We made some changes this year to the fees, and the overall bill, the average bill went back up. And then you can see, based on the recommendations we have before you all today, where the average user bill would be in fiscal year 23. Next slide. So just in summary, the water fee recommendation, there is a need to continue to recover that revenue that was lost from the capital fee. And that will allow us to maintain our credit rating and our debt service coverage. As David mentioned, we have the $20 million meter replacement project coming up, which means we will be out in the debt market next fiscal year. And so we will be being evaluated by our credit rating agencies and also the local government commission, looking at our debt service numbers and making sure that we're still on track to recover that revenue that was lost 2 years ago. As I also mentioned, the plan that we put forward last year is minimizing that burden on the customers by spreading that revenue recovery out over time. And staff is again recommending that we continue the plan last year, which is an adjustment to both the volumetric and the base charges that will hit most customers, both residential and commercial. Next slide. All right, so I'll stop there and see if you all have any questions about the water rate adjustment. And again, David Melton's here as well, so happy to answer any questions about water.
Tony, this is Gwen. Do you have a sense of where our fees are, water fees versus MSD's fees, and kind of, that a comparison of how that went? I believe that they did not have a rate increase 1 year, but they've been gradually, they increase rates or fees pretty much every year, except 1 year at the very beginning of the pandemic, I think was 20. But do we have a comparison of that?
I think we actually do, Taylor. I don't know if we were just talking about that yesterday, and I think we prepared some data. Taylor, I don't know if we ended up including that slide or not. Or David, if you have that information handy, I'll look to one of you all to answer that.
Yeah, we do have that. If we can go to slide 30.
Oh, is it later?
We just included it we weren't planning it as part of the presentation, but just as a resource if a question was asked.
Okay, do you mind?
Alicia, you may have to go out of the presentation and then back in, but it should be the very last slide. But I think you are correct that that was 1 year where they did not increase, but otherwise they've done an increase pretty consistently over the last several years that we had data. And I want to say, I'm trying to look now at what the actual percentage is. It's been around 2.5. I think last year was 2.75, but somewhere around 2.5% annually increase.
Mhm.
I think that's where we were. We need to get to slide 30, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
There we go. Thank you. Okay.
So you can see MSDs at the very top there, and that's a pretty linear, as you can see, and then water directly underneath where you can see the drop from FY21, and then solid waste and stormwater under that. Solid waste in the light green and stormwater in the dark.
Okay. Yeah, that was my sense. So basically, they've been increasing their rates at a higher percent than water has, but except for that 1 year. Okay.
Yeah.
And pretty consistent and steady.
Right. Which, I think is, given the nature of both water and sewer, well, and really everything, it just makes sense to me to just, try to keep up as opposed to keeping it flat for several years and then, having to have a large increase. So, although, you hate to have you hate to increase fees ever, I just think this is the nature of this beast. Okay, thank you for that information.
And I really appreciate having this slide. So if you could incorporate it into the presentation by the time it gets to council, that would be helpful. I was going to request this for across all the fees. This is actually a very helpful slide for someone like me that hasn't been involved very long.
Do any of the other council members have any questions? Any more questions, I guess, is what I should say. Okay, thank you. So do we go to Taylor or still to you, Tony?
Yeah, we go to Taylor from here.
All right, Taylor, you're up.
Now we got to rewind back to, I think we were on slide 12 maybe. All right, so I'm going to first talk a little bit about the stormwater service and fees. You can go on to the next slide. These are basically just a few reminders from the presentation that we did with you all on January 25th, kind of looking at some of the challenges in the stormwater service. And really kind of, I think the main one is this aging infrastructure and the deferred maintenance challenges it creates, where essentially because of that deferred maintenance, we're having to do these reactive emergency repairs to make sure that the system continues to be operational, but then that ultimately leads to limited capacity for us to invest in improving and maintaining the system, which ultimately leads to that lower service, lower impact, makes it challenging for us to achieve our goals, which again gets kind of back around to deferred maintenance. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I think the main challenge that stormwater is seeing. Next slide. Another really important one, if we go to the next slide, is really the cost and complexity of putting this infrastructure in, from staff project management capacity to challenges with other utilities, especially in downtown or some of the more urbanized areas. Easement acquisitions, also a challenge. And then kind of looking at the contractor side, seeing busy contractors, that are costing more and materials are costing them more, which they're passing along. That's also something we're seeing on the operating side in some of the maintenance and replacement work that we do ourselves, those material costs, which again we talked about in greater detail back in January. Next slide. And then lastly, just want to mention the impact of climate change, and essentially if you look at this chart, which is the high water events in the French Broad River, you can see there's a lot more of them in the recent past than there were farther back in time. And really all that means is that, it's making all of those problems with deferred maintenance and the other challenges that Stormwater Services is experiencing that much worse, because we're seeing more flooding events happening in our community. Next slide. So again, managing stormwater is a complex service. It's trying to mitigate flooding. It's trying to improve water quality as well. We have significant maintenance and capacity needs within the system. The last time that we increased stormwater fees was in fiscal year 1920. And we think that we have some additional funding that we need to address all of these needs that we've been talking about. So next slide. What we're recommending is a pretty relatively minor increase to each one of the tiers. And again, just for reference, most single family residents are in that middle, that 2,001 to 4,000 square foot tier 2. So that's kind of where most folks are paying. And I think that's the last slide that we have on stormwater. So if there are any questions about that, happy to answer those now.
Sandra?
Okay. Hi, Taylor. I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, like I said, this may be already, I just want to know, how much does Buncombe County contribute to our capital improvements for water and so, for this type of infrastructure? Do they give us anything towards it?
The county may pay the stormwater fee on their property that they own that's in the city limits, but
they don't really help us with the capital improvements about infrastructure at all. Okay. The other question I want to ask you is in 2009, I did see a big increase in the, the flood issues down with the French Broad River. Would you say that maybe what contributed to that was all the construction, the things that we were doing there? Is that what caused that big issue? Was that some of that?
I'll defer to Amy Deaton or Greg Schuler to hopefully be able to answer that question better than I can.
I'll give it the first go. Maybe Councilwoman Kilgore, but it's probably a lot of the development that's happened upstream, and like Taylor mentioned before, global warming and climate change it's happening. So it's probably more to do with development and climate change, just generally speaking. Amy, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any specifics that have caused that, but again, yeah, development, it's always, and with development, it's not necessarily what's happening within, our city limits, as it is coming from other communities, that just, it's the whole watershed that contributes to the French Broad. So if there's development going on in other communities as well, that will contribute to it also. But I think in 2004 is when we really saw that one of the largest storm events, and that I think that initiated some increases. And then again in like 2013, there was another large storm event. So we've really had large storm events happening that kind of have pushed stormwater fee increases, because that's when it's on people's minds the most.
Could we go back to that chart where he was showing the actual impact?
Are you talking the ones that show the major water events?
Yes, the water events. Because I think it was, and like she was, I think it's 15. Yeah. Okay. And so, yeah, that's what I was looking at, more or less 2009. I was just wondering, was that particular reason it was so elevated, more or less, that maybe you got a handle on what was causing that for it to drop that quickly?
Hurricane Danny.
Hmm?
A lot of these events are related to major storm events that come through the area. So any type of hurricane, there's back-to-back tropical storm events that can happen. I think one year there were like 3 tropical storm events that came through that really caused some major flooding. So any type of hurricane, major tropical storm event, or the biggest issue we're facing now is just the overall general larger storm events that are happening more on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions, Sandra?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Hey, somewhat related, maybe not at all related. I know that there were unfunded mandates from the state to manage stormwater better. And I don't know when that went into effect, but my question is, because I feel like it was like 2012, 2013, maybe. Were those unfunded mandates only for municipalities, or is that across the board? Do counties have to implement those stormwater mitigation, or is it just municipalities?
So I think the stormwater rules that came from the state, they initially started in 2004, and I think it was the 2005 timeframe when they actually became permanent rules.
Okay.
And so that's what generated us having the permit and having to do a stormwater management plan. And that generated, it was based on a certain population that you have during a census study. So every census that changes the update and updates the population, it may kick in municipalities. You have a phase 1, which were really the really large municipalities like Charlotte, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Raleigh. And then for Asheville, we are considered a phase 2. So it's those like kind of next tier level municipalities based on a certain size, and the fact that you own and operate what they call MS4s, municipal separate stormwater systems. So the fact that we own and operate our stormwater systems, pipes, ditches, all of that, it kicked us into having to do those phase 2 requirements. And again, as the census data is updated, it will kick in municipalities that tend to grow into that population size.
But I mean, basically, to Sandra's point, until parts of the county become a little bit bigger, they're contributing to the problem, but not helping to pay for the problem.
The county does. There's 2 different types. There's a designation qualifier, and there's another term. The county does it because they want to do it. The state didn't necessarily kick them in. And there are other counties that meet that qualification that do become an actually designated phase 2 community. There's delegated. There you go, Nancy. I knew it started with the D. It's designated and delegated. So those are the 2 types of criteria.
Okay, great. Thank you. Teamwork makes a dream.
There's a lot of words, a lot of acronyms in stormwater. So.
Right. No pressure, but you're getting backed up by your team. Appreciate that. Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, I think we can move on.
All right. So I think next we're going to go into sanitation. And again, just pulled a few slides of some information from the presentation that we did with you all on sanitation, which was way back on October 26th. Just kind of hitting a few of those, They have some needs for additional staffing just to keep up with the increasing number of collection points that they've seen over the last several years. We also have a new recycling contract that we started, I think this year or maybe last year, I can't remember, but there's an escalator built into that contract annually. And then also talked about a need to review the operations, their fees, and the ordinances, and really kind of look at all of that holistically to improve service delivery. Next slide. Another thing that we discussed was that some staffing specifically dedicated to waste reduction would really help us to deliver programs and achieve some of City Council's stated goals around waste reduction and sustainability, and also the opportunity to invest in some staffing that could be dedicated to litter, homeless camps, illegal dumping, and other maintenance challenges that are we're seeing in the community right now, and trying to address those concerns. Next slide. So the solid waste fee is really the only fee that's charged for any of these services related to sanitation that generates substantial revenue. We did want to acknowledge that there is, potential to make some investments funded through either general revenues or the American Rescue Plan. And that, if neither of those two options were chosen, that, we could look at reducing our current level of service if there's not an opportunity to make additional investment in sanitation. Next slide. So again, just a little history, we haven't increased the fee in quite some time. The last time was fiscal year 2016, 2017. And really, again, we're seeing, a challenge to maintain our existing level of service without some additional resources. So the current recommendation would be to increase the solid waste fee by $2 a month. Next slide. So we wanted to bring kind of all of this together for you all. And if you have questions about sanitation, happy to answer those, of course. And show what the impact to these three service areas and the fee changes associated with them would be on what I'm gonna call our standard kind of household. Again, the tier 2 is what most single family homes are in the stormwater, and then water based on both the volumetric and that base fee using 6 CCFs a month. You can see the bi-monthly bill and the total annual increase. And I will note that in our staff report that we initially sent out, and I will take the blame for this, that the bi-monthly bill increase total was not accurate, but this is correct. So apologies for that.
What might be helpful, and you may not have it right now, but it strikes me that the solid waste, that it looks like a lot, but if the last time we had an increase was 17, it might be at least to have in our back pocket, sort of what the increase in our costs have been for solid waste from 2017 to now. And basically, what's happened, I'm assuming, is that the general fund has absorbed those increases. So it might be good to just have that. That's kind of a long time for those fees not to have increased. And certainly, at least this year for sure, we've seen just such a substantial increase in salaries for folks, and that may just be something to have in case it gets asked at the council, so that our constituents are aware of these issues. Do Sandra or Sage, you have any questions? Okay. I think you can go on.
All right. I already decided we're moving on from questions. I think we just have really, I think, one more slide that's kind of a summary of the other fee changes in the staff report. And I will try to go through these relatively quickly. They're all kind of individual small changes, that generally aren't going to impact, the entire community in the same way that the three that we just discussed will. But starting from the top there, the event and facility usage, that's really for use of city property and facilities or to provide. Yes, ma'am.
So this is where I get concerned about the events. I understand many of these fee increase needs. Can someone explain to me why we are, as we come out of a pandemic, as we try and bring events and other people back downtown, why we are trying to make this more difficult? I heard from a number of the typical nonprofits and businesses that throw the events in downtown, and they're concerned about this. So can you give me some background on why?
Sure. I think at a high level,
Do you have details of this so that, if people are watching from,
True. There is a lot of information in our packet.
yeah, I wondered if you could show some detail so that, for the thousands of people that are watching this, they can see the background.
Sure. I think we could pull up the staff report and share that. I think that's possible. All right, there you go. And see if I can help navigate us here.
I think it's page 6.
Yeah, I think I would ask John Philman to speak to the specifics, but broadly, I'll say I think primarily it's really about the adjustments are really about better reflecting the staff time that goes into the processing these applications and attending events when that's required. But John, please add some color commentary to that.
Sure, thank you. This is John Philman with the Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities Department. And I can kind of go through the reasons why we were recommending changes on this. First is that we are working to rebalance the use of public space in comparison to staff capacity. So we are currently experiencing a really significant issue with use of public space. We don't have staff support to provide for those events that take place in parks, and we have limited law enforcement resources to facilitate events and runs and walks and things like that, to the point that we almost did not have a marathon last weekend because we are in such staffing crisis right now with things. So in an effort to rebalance, we're looking at fees as one of the ways that we can help make sure that Asheville's outdoor public space is not the least expensive option for people to use when they're looking to produce an event. The city's fees for property use fees have not changed in at least 14 years. And in our comparisons with other cities, for instance, Charlotte-Mecklenburg County charges an average of $150 an hour without any discounts. For a large number of their facilities, $450 an hour for a park from Moorhead Street to Pearl Street. We also see resident rates and non-resident rates between $300 and $390 per hour for a number of additional parks in that district. If we look at Greensboro, North Carolina, the Center City Park is $250 per hour at a 2,500 person capacity, compared to Pack Square Park with an 8,000 person capacity, not including Pack Square. We don't come anywhere close to what Greensboro is charging for our park spaces. LeBauer Park, for instance, is $1,250 per hour with no nonprofit discount available. So we do have a 75% discount available to nonprofit organizations that we offer on our fees for permits and property use. And so While the Roger McGuire Green and Stage fee at $800 for 3 hours and $200 each additional hour is an additional $300 for the first block and $100 each additional hour after that. For a nonprofit organization, that would reduce that to $200 per hour and $50, or $200 for the first 3 hours and $50 per hour thereafter. Right now, those fees at the property would be $125 for the first 3 hours and $25 each additional hour just for the green space. And most of our other parks rent for, on the nonprofit rate, $25 for the first 3 hours and $7 per hour thereafter. And so you can see with these low costs for rental rates, we are being, we're definitely the lowest cost option of any public or private facility in this region. And I think that the reason why it's been 14 years since we've proposed fees changes is because under the Parks Department, where these fees had lived previously, our motivation was not related to cost recovery. And under our new department, we are looking more towards getting closer to that cost recovery line. Although these fees still do not bring us anywhere near to where we would need to be for 100% cost recovery. As far as the application fees go, we had a $50 application fee and a $100 fee for events of greater than 1,000 people in attendance. We are seeing that the cost to administer these applications is increasing. The software technologies that we need to become more efficient run about $15,000 to $20,000 per year for those costs, and we're just not coming anywhere close to recovering our costs for administering these events. So we are looking at providing the $100 application fee for events of 500, a $200 application fee for events of up to 8,000 in attendance, and a $400 application fee for events over 8,000 in attendance. I can say that we would probably only have 2, maybe 3 events that would reach that scale. And right now, those are city events that we are not charging those fees on anyway. So we're looking at a $100 or $200 application fee in most cases for special events, with property use fees applied when they use public space outside of a street.
Thank you for that additional background, John. I just think it's a really unfortunate year to try and do this, much like we didn't raise water in the middle of the pandemic. And I don't know how we're going to end up voting on this today, but this particular one, if it's all lumped together, I'm hoping this one is separate because I'm not in support. Thank you for the info.
So, John, you've done a lot of work on this, and clearly have looked at competitive cities, and I think it's very eye-opening the fact that you're saying we haven't touched these in 14 years. That just, I don't know what the thinking was as to why we never second guessed ourselves on this, but we're clearly way behind on keeping up with costs, etc. Might I ask that when this is presented to council, just because certainly in this area, folks out there may want some more information, that we amend the staff report to include this, the kind of detail you just gave us about competition, etc. I mean, not competition, but comparison to other cities, etc. And one of the things I'd like to see is to show people how much we are not recovering. That this is not a revenue generator for the city. And while we want to support our nonprofit partners, we're a nonprofit also. And so why should general taxpayers support these nonprofits? They're probably increasing their fees, etc. So, I think to just make it clear that this is not, this is not intended to be a profit maker, and not even close to making a profit. Sage, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. And I do agree that it's odd that we've waited 14 years. I just don't think this is the best year to do this. And we've been getting some emails about a run of special events. I think they're categorized under special events, the Downtown Farmers Market. And this may be a great example of what is happening. Like that farmers market may not even happen because we cannot, if I understand correctly, they need things that only the city can supply, but we don't have the staff to supply them. So the market may not happen. Is that correct to y'all's knowledge? And I mean, is this an example of that happening, that we just don't have the staff to create, and somehow this leveraging fees for a total of $50,000 an increase in annual revenue will fix that?
I think that the issue with the city market has been largely resolved with a determination that it would be sufficient for the event to park vehicles across the roadway as a barrier. And so they are planning to begin on schedule with that plan in mind. That doesn't necessarily work for each event, because it does put a question on the event as to whether the insurance for the automobile will cover any incident or injury if that vehicle is involved. But for the moment, we are okay with the city market using the vehicles as barriers. We do not have the staff to put out the vehicle barriers that are being recommended by law enforcement at this point in time. We are looking at every possible option we can to try to create a way for organizers to be self-sufficient on that. It's just difficult for organizers to make that type of investment in these materials for a one-time event. And because of our area, we don't have those resources nearby, making it cost-effective for them to get those water-filled barriers or other resources at a one-day event. But that is similar to where we are, Councilwoman Turner, with our experience. We have extremely limited capacity to assist with events. We are looking at every way we can to help them be self-sufficient, providing keys in advance to buildings, code locks for them to self-service access to gates, anything that we can do to try to keep the events going in light of our challenges.
Thank you, John. Have the folks that do some of the smaller events been notified? Have any of these vendors that normally work with us been notified? Or because I'm hearing from some right now that they had no idea this was even coming. So just a little background. I work downtown a lot and know a lot of the events and help volunteer for them and stuff. And I just want to express that they are sharing this will be very difficult and will probably cancel some events for them. So the end that we can do things like using cars at the city market, I wonder if there are other things we can do this year that don't make us have to raise fees. But I understand and I empathize with the extreme short staffing.
Sure.
Taylor, do you want to go back to where you are?
Sure. So again, quickly trying to continue down the list, development related fees, that's primarily marginal increase in fees charged for stormwater review and permitting. And something that I think you'll hear me say frequently over the next several minutes, that's really about bringing our cost recovery closer to, in this particular instance, alignment with recommendations from the 2018 development fee study that we completed. Homestay and noise exceedance permits, the homestay is an increase of $50 for a new application, $25 for a renewal. And again, that's to better recover the cost of administration and enforcement. The noise ordinance related piece is really just adding to the fee manual the permitting that's outlined within that ordinance. On traffic control materials and services, again, this is primarily cost of providing equipment and staff at events. And we are often having to utilize overtime to find folks to work those events. Again, as John kind of mentioned, and again, that's about recovering costs. Right-of-way closures, for the permanent right-of-way closures, that's really splitting an existing fee to better align with our process. So there's a little bit before the TRC review, and then some after, for if those don't end up going all the way through. And also, again, recovering costs for required public notices of multiple closures for permanent right-of-way closures, and increasing recovery of costs for review and enforcement for temporary closures as well. The hourly flat rates for parking lots, those are really about two specific lots, 50 Ashland Avenue and the Marjorie lot that's just adjacent to City Hall that employees utilize. And that's just providing us some flexibility to allow for some short-term parking options in both of those lots.
I just wanted to share something I've experienced in COVID managing parking lots, surface parking lots in downtown. We added a cap on a daily rate and saw a significant increase in income simply because people would pay for the whole day not knowing what they would be doing and then move on and the next person would come and so on. So I just noticed that's not an option. It may be something we want to think about.
And Ken or Garrett, if you want to chime in, I do think that the providing that flat fee would allow us to just kind of do a one, pay that and you'd be good for the day. But Ken, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes, this is Ken Putnam with the Transportation Department. Sage, that sounds like a good option, a good idea. The way we patterned what we've got shown was what was done by a lot of the private lots and is still done by the private lots that we're aware of, where they charge a flat fee for every time you enter. So as an example, if you were to go into the Marjorie lot, we'll say at 5 o'clock after the employees are gone, and you could stay there the whole evening if you wanted to. But if you came out and left and then came back, you have to pay the flat fee again. So in a way, I think that structure does a little bit of what you're saying, because you could stay there all day. And there's an example of a private lot over on Cox Avenue where they charge $3. So if you came in at 7:30 in the morning as an employee, you could stay there all day and leave at 5:30 and you've only paid $3. But if you decided to leave for lunch and came back, you had to pay another $3.
Yes, I'm familiar with that lot. It's managed by a company that has no other lots.
You know that one, okay.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're at the last two here. Daily use of metered parking. That's again better reflecting the cost of review and revenue loss from hourly parking, and that's for when spaces are closed down for construction or an event or what have you. Also a slight increase specifically for the use of ADA spaces or loading zones, because there's limited availability of those two specifically around downtown. Yes, Ken.
And just a minor correction on that, where we show the change for the use of the ADA spaces, instead of $18, it would be a $28 change, because the current fee is $22 for any space. So that's just a typo.
We'll get that corrected for the council staff report.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, one more question. I have so many questions today. I'm sorry, but so my experience with meters downtown is that you park at the 2 hours. Now I use the Park Mobile app. I don't feed the change, but you have to move. You can't just renew or update. So how does someone pay $25 for an entire day in a metered space? Is there some activity I'm not aware of or an option?
This is, Sage, that's a very good question. This is when someone needs to close the space, like for a construction activity or a special event or something like that. That's what we're talking about. And unfortunately, a lot of times you'll see that these spaces will have a dumpster in them or something like that. But that's what we're talking about. So the spaces like the ADA spaces and even the loading zones, there are fewer of those, and we really need to keep them open as much as we can. So we're just trying to make sure that when someone closes it, they don't just do it for an extended period of time.
And so thank you for that, Ken, appreciate it. The last one is adjustments to water development fees, and those are fees that folks pay for new connections to the water system.
Me again. Sorry. So I think by the time this gets to council, it would be helpful to have some explanation next to these meter sizes. I'm not sure that everyone will know the difference between an 8-inch or a 2-inch. An example could be like the types of projects we're reviewing. So if a, say, 200 apartment complex needs a 10-inch or now needs a 12-inch, but they wanted to have affordable housing, this could be an impact. So is there a way to flush out some examples of these meter sizes for us when you come to council? Like, what's a typical house? What's a typical office building? What's a hotel? What's a apartment complex, maybe?
I'm going to let David handle that when I see him on the call.
Yeah, we can provide that. Just for context for today's conversation, a 5/8 is your normal single family residence. We actually have one 10-inch meter in the system. But most of hotels and things like that are in the 3 to 4-inch range. And apartment complexes are typically either 6 or 8, 6 being a minimum because that's what is required for fire flow and fire hydrants and those type of things. But we can add that to this.
Thank you, that's helpful. And so we're adding a 12-inch fee, knowing that we only have one existing 10-inch. Are we thinking we'll have 12 inches?
I don't think we will. We just expanded it a little bit because the American Water Works Association expanded their range to a 12-inch as well. So we just added that in just in case. A 12-inch would probably be if we took on a very large wholesale customer or something along those lines.
Great. So I think that additional context will really help council and the community better understand this slide. Thank you.
To further Sage's question, I thought that for a lot of these fees, like the development fees, like the hookup fees, for lack of a better expression, I thought the city does give discounts for affordable housing. No?
No.
Well, MSD does something.
And we could.
Yeah, at one point we did some different things for affordable housing, but because of Sullivan, we found out that we probably shouldn't have been doing those. So we discontinued those.
Oh, David, can you just do me a favor then and check with MSD, because I feel like they're still doing it.
I believe you're right, Grant. I believe
I mean, I don't want to stop them from doing it, but I also don't want them to be doing something that, if we've decided that maybe we're running afoul of the law, I don't want MSD doing it. I mean, because they gave those discounts at our request, not, just out of the goodness of their heart, I think.
Yeah, and they're perfectly fine to do that under the way they're structured. Okay. It's the Sullivan Acts, which pertain just to asphalt, which prohibits us.
Oh, okay. And other questions? Sage, you act like you wanted to say something.
It was just that comment. If the Sullivan Act is specific to Asheville or all cities?
Only Asheville.
Oh, okay.
You know that. Come on, you know that, Sage.
Yeah. Oh, that's the big case. Okay, I wasn't familiar with the Sullivan part. Okay.
Yeah. So how about transit? No consideration of increasing transit fee, bus fees?
No, there is no consideration for that at this time.
And have we done any sort of competitive analysis of that?
There was an analysis of that in the transit master plan, and I do believe they recommended a slight increase at that time. I think, personally, I feel like we're trying to get more folks using transit, and since it's such a small portion of our revenue, I don't know that the economic benefit to our vulnerable communities outweighs that. But if that's something that you would like us to look at, we'd be happy to.
Well, I mean, it's not for this year, but I do feel like, if we're going to see these fuel costs doing what they continue to do and energy costs doing what they continue to do, we're just digging ourselves a bigger and bigger hole, with the transit funding. I mean, I remember it was like back in 2015 that we were proposing to go to $1.25, and we still haven't done that. So, I mean, I hear you, but I think it's I think it's a pretty amazing deal.
May I ask, while we have both Jessica and Ken here, if the parking fee collection has been fixed, or are we still seeing garage able to function and therefore not able to provide money for transit? I know that's not on our agenda, but if there's an update, I'd love that.
Yes, Sage, again, that's a good question. As far as the equipment itself, the new equipment from a technological basis, that's all been solved. And that was solved and fully put into operation on February 28th. We are still struggling, though, with, I guess, the perception of the folks that had tried to use it and it didn't work for them. So we're working very closely with the vendor to try to communicate and to get people to use it more. And the thing that's hard to believe, when someone is trying to get out, instead of breaking the gate, all they need to do is push a call button, and they will be talking to someone, and that person will open the gate for them. And we would much prefer to have that happen so we don't have to fix the gates constantly. One of the things that we've learned throughout this whole process is our old gates were just that. There was no bells and whistles to them. If you activated them, they'd go up, they'd come down, that sort of thing. So if they broke, they were much easier to fix. Now, with computers and technology, if a gate malfunctions, a series of codes go off that you have to kind of go through and determine what the problem is before you can fix it. And also, but that's not what we're experiencing now. It's just the people that continue to break the gates.
Is there?
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
What?
I don't know what that was.
What was it? That's
That
weird.
was somebody
I
here.
know everything. Ken, what?
Oh, it's your phone, Ken, I think.
I guess my phone decided to talk.
Right. So if somebody runs through a parking gate, is there any ramification to that individual?
When we used to, when we had the security cameras and they always functioned, the police department would, based on the license tag, and if it was local especially, they would take an invoice on our behalf to the homeowner. But now we don't really have that capability as much. And then when on one of the gates just recently, someone wanted to do the limbo dance under one, and they tripped and they grabbed the gate and it broke. Well, they just immediately ran off.
Hey, Ken, I know the parking committee is kind of defunct right now, but if you ever want to do those commercials again, call me. We can get people to use those garages again.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, back to you, Taylor. Or I don't know, Taylor or Tony. Are we done?
I think we are close to done. Taylor's going to hand it back off to me, so I think we can skip this question slide unless there's anything else from the committee. Just a reminder of where we go from here. So we do have a council work session April 12th, and then we would look to bring you all this package of fees that we've discussed today at the April 26th council meeting for adoption. So with that, that's all we have. Unless Ms. Campbell has anything to add, I would turn it back over to Councilmember Whistler.
Okay, so I see that you want an action. Well, I guess you want us to move this forward to review by City Council, and I heard Councilwoman Turner suggests that we separate the fees out. And so I'd entertain a motion to approve or, basically recommend these changes except for the
The proposed net fee changes?
Is it just
Events.
the events, the community regional entertainment facilities? Is that what you're saying, Sage?
I think that's what titled, yeah.
So basically, page 6. So everything but page 6, make that motion to take that to approval.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. So I'll do a roll call. So this is basically recommending approval of these fee changes to City Council, except for page 6, the community and regional entertainment facilities. So with that, Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Okay. And then we'll separately do a recommendation for the community and regional entertainment facilities. May I have a motion to approve those changes?
So moved.
And I'd second that. So I will also do a roll call on this, and this is just for the community and regional entertainment facilities changes. Councilwoman Kilgore?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Nay.
And I'm an aye. So if we can have the minutes reflect that to go to City Council. Okay, great. And again, staff, you've done a really great job, and it's clear that you've done a lot of work on bringing forward, the history of these fees, etc. I would just suggest on, if you listen to our discussion and the kind of questions we're answering, if we could beef up the staff report, so that, it was very telling for me, unfortunate timing, but the fact that we haven't raised facilities fees for 14 years is pretty telling to me. And I think if we had that out in the community, it would be helpful and maybe blunt a little bit of the criticism. Nobody wants to see fees increases. We all get that, but we also are all dealing with the reality of increased costs. And I just think it's very clear that the city is not trying to make money on these. And I think there's an equity discussion too. It's like, why should property owners take on such significant burden for areas that benefit a few? So that's just my 18 cents apparently. So we did not get any, so I'm going to move on to public comment. We did not get any any comments before the meeting, either by voicemail or email. Do we have anyone on the line that would like to make any public comment, Alicia?
No, there are no callers in the queue.
Is there anybody watching, Alicia? Oh, wounded. All right. Well, I'm sure this will be the one that, will attract YouTube viewers for years. And I really, it was fun to watch staff back each other up with all the questions, because this committee has a tendency to ask a lot of questions. So as we affectionately say, it's fun to watch your working together so amicably. So with that, I will adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.